What's on your mind?
So I'm going to introduce this one just because this one is aimed at Barry, and I think it's fantastic. So we have a listener who basically comments on almost every single one of our YouTube videos, and it's great to have that engaging sort of platform with listeners. So we really encourage all of you to put those comments up. If it's a quick little thought, just put it up. We love seeing it. So the question is, so this one's from somebody by the name of Dean Kennedy. If Barry feels up to it and you can fit it in, I would love to hear his take on the trolley problem as an added twist, while also pondering if this situation is acted out in a vehicle simulator with hundreds, if not thousands, of subjects who have no prior knowledge of the experiment, what the results would be, and can these be built into an AI system? Quite a loaded question, Barry. Let's unpick this one. Go for it.
Yeah, so you're unleashing the beast here, right? So Barry always feels up to these kind of conversations. The trolley problem is one of the fundamental questions in philosophy, and we chatted a little bit about it in the last episode when we were talking about consequentialism versus deontology. And the trolley problem is the practical implementation of that thought process, right? So just to remind ourselves, a consequentialist point of view is looking at an action is right if the consequences end up being right, no matter what happens in between, right? Whereas a deontological point of view says, no, the intentions of the action determine whether it's right or wrong, and even if there's bad consequences, if you acted with good intentions, you did the right thing. So that's a quick reminder about the two thought processes. So the trolley problem goes like this. Imagine you are on a bridge, right? And there is a train barreling down the tracks, and there are two tracks the train could go onto. So it can either keep going on the track it's currently on, or you can pull a lever and make the train go onto the second pair of tracks, right? That's kind of the context. On the original track, there is, for example, 5 human beings that are tied down to the train and will die if the train keeps going over that track. Alternatively, if you switch it to the other track, there is one person on that track, right, who will die if you switch to that track. So the idea is, you as the third-party bystander, you're watching this happen, and there's only one of two options. Do you pull that lever, right? So, for example, do you pull the lever to save the 5 people and kill the one, or do you leave the lever and kill the 5 people and save the one, right? So that's how the trolley problem starts. And most people, I'm curious to think what you think, Chad. Most people will pull the lever there. Most people will say, sure, I'm going to save the 5 people, and because even though it's a tragedy that the one person dies, to save the 5 people is actually doing it for the greater good. So I'm going to pull the lever. Yep. Is that intuition correct for you?
100%, yeah.
Cool. So that's exactly what most people say. So then it takes you to another level. So then it says, cool, imagine the same situation, but instead of a lever this time, the train is barreling down the tracks towards the 5 people, and you're standing on a bridge above the tracks, right? And there's a fat man standing next to you. And you have a choice to push the fat man off the bridge onto the track and stop the train to save the 5. Right, so theoretically now, it's the same thing. You are killing the one to save the 5. But when you ask people if they're going to push the fat man off the bridge, all of a sudden the intuitions change a lot, and there's a much more 50-50 split between the people who say I can't do that, right? And so what would you do, Chad?
To be honest, I don't know. I'm now stuck. I'm stuck, Barry. Hopefully this train can slow down.
That's exactly it, right? It even though the actual context is exactly the same, the calculation is exactly the same, the mere fact of changing, me pulling a lever, which is kind of detached from the whole situation, I'm just playing God and I'm making a decision, all of a sudden now I have to actually physically push someone off a bridge, and all of a sudden it feels very, very different. And so what the trolley problem does, it then goes into, there's 1,000 different variations of this kind of thing. There's 20, and then there's 10, and then you're pushing a guy, and you're pulling there's like 1,000 of these variations. What the problem tries to show you is that our intuitions about what is right and what is wrong are very messy, and people do not agree on them, right? So when you ask these questions to like a mass audience, you'll often find a 50-50 split or a 60-40 split, and you'll be surprised by the number of people who disagree with your intuition on whatever situation is in front of you. And so what the trolley problem shows, again, is that if we're going to try and decide on a complete set of ethics that we're going to program into a self-driving car, we're not going to agree. right? We're not going to find a set of ethics because this becomes very, very real with a self-driving car, right? If you imagine a self-driving car situation barreling down a highway and there's an accident up front and he can't stop, does he swerve out of the way into oncoming traffic and destroy the car in that lane, or does it stay in this lane and destroy the car in front of it, right? So that's a very real trolley problem that we're going to face in the coming years. And so I think the question that Dean is kind of bringing up, I hope I'm doing it justice, but I think the question he's bringing up is that this kind of discussion is very difficult to program because we don't have consensus. We don't have an algorithm or an understanding of what an ethical framework looks like that everyone can agree with. Everyone's ethics depend on their upbringing, the way they think, the way they were educated, where they were born, and 1,000 different factors. And so for a car company to decide how we're going to interact with this real-life trolley problem is very, very difficult. And it's one of those things where we're not going to know how to deal with it until we actually get there. And for the philosophers, it's fascinating because this has been a thought experiment for decades, right? And all of a sudden is becoming very, very real. And a lot of their thinking and their thought processes are starting to be tested in the real world. The last part of his question was thinking about, let me just read it here. If it's acted out in a vehicle simulator with hundreds, if not thousands of subjects who had no prior knowledge of the experiment, what would the results be? And this has actually happened. So there was a research organization that did an online survey that didn't talk at all about the trolley problem. It didn't include any of the philosophy. It didn't do any of that. It simply had an interactive web app where people would go on and play this game. So they give you that game with the fat man and the five on the tracks, and people would vote on whatever they would do. And they did thousands of these variations, and the thing went very viral, and so they got, I think, 200,000 responses. Obviously looking for the trends in the marketplace and the trends from real people who don't understand it's a psychological thought experiment and they just think it's like a cool game or whatever the story is. And those results were very interesting because they bared out what we thought, is that there is no consensus. There's a complete range of thoughts across the board, and even on these very even on the first question I asked you, where there's a high probability you're going to pull the lever, there's still a significant non-negligible portion that are not going to pull the lever because they want to know no parts of it at all. They just want to leave it completely. And so it was a very interesting experiment and a very interesting realization that we are nowhere near consensus. If we're going to try and decide what as a world we're going to put into these cars, we actually have got no idea at this stage. And that is scary because it's coming, the technology is on the way, and real-life philosophy is going to have to be in play. But if we can't agree on anything, then I don't know how we're going to move forward. So that's kind of, if I had to try and answer the three parts, I hope it did justice, Dean. Chad, do you have any other thoughts or comments?
I mean, being a person who's looking on this completely cold, I think you articulated it perfectly. So I definitely understand the massive problem that this is. And yeah, it's a fascinating one to see where you sit on it. I certainly think if Trump was playing this game and he was the one and the Congress people were the five, I think I know what he would do. But yeah, thanks for answering that question. And Dean, thanks for asking it. The show isn't what it is without our listeners. And yeah, we definitely appreciate the questions. So yeah, great question and great answer. Thanks, Barry. Across the pond.